The night sky above the Korean military base looked normal until it did not. The stars twinkled as they always did, and the moon was nowhere to be seen. Captain Jiho stood on the observation deck of the command center drinking his third cup of coffee. The base was quiet except for the usual sounds of night shift soldiers walking their routes. Then the darkness above them began to move. Lieutenant Day was the first to spot it through his binoculars. He had been watching the desert for 3 hours. As part of his duty, when a patch of stars simply vanished, the young soldier blinked hard, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. But the dark spot was getting bigger. Sir Day called into his radio, "Captain Jiho, please come to the North Tower." Immediately set down his coffee and walked quickly to where Day was standing. The lieutenant pointed up at the sky, and Jiho followed his finger. There, in the darkness, was something massive, something that blocked out the stars as it moved, something that made no sound at all. "Get Commander Myra." Jiho ordered, his voice calm but urgent. "Wake up the whole base, but do it quietly, no alarms." Yet the thing in the sky was getting closer now, and its shape was becoming clear. It was a ship, but unlike any aircraft the humans had ever built. It was smooth and curved like a giant teardrop made of dark metal. The surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it almost invisible against the black sky. Commander Myra arrived at the tower. Within minutes she was fully dressed and alert despite being woken from sleep. Her training had taught her to be ready for anything at any time. She looked up at the approaching ship and her expression remained calm. "How long has it been visible?" she asked. "About 10 minutes." Day replied. "Still no sound from it at all." Myra nodded and activated her communication device. "Get me the president, get me the UN, get me every military leader in the region. This is not a drill." The alien ship continued its silent descent toward the desert floor about 2 kilometers from the base. As it got closer, the humans could see more details. The hull was covered in strange markings that seemed to shift and move in the darkness. There were no visible windows or doors, just smooth metal that seemed to bend light around it. The ship touched down on the desert sand without making a sound. There was no dust cloud, no impact, no sign that something weighing thousands of tons had just landed. It simply settled onto the ground like a leaf falling from a tree. For several minutes nothing happened. The ship sat in the desert darkness while the humans watched from their base. Jiho had ordered all lights to be dimmed and all personnel to remain at their posts. Everyone was ready, but no one knew what they were ready for. Then a section of the ship began to glow with soft blue light. The metal seemed to melt away, creating an opening in the side of the vessel. 3 figures emerged from the ship and began walking toward the base. The aliens were tall, much taller than humans. They moved with smooth, flowing steps that made no sound on the sand. Their skin was pale, almost white, and seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Their eyes were large and dark, taking up much of their faces. They wore no clothes that the humans could see, but their bodies were covered in what looked like natural armor. "They are coming straight for us," Myra observed. "They know we are here." The 3 aliens stopped about 50 meters from the base fence. The one in the center raised its hand and spoke. Its voice was strange, like the sound of wind through metal, but somehow the humans could understand the words. "Humans of this world, we are the Vex. We come from the dark spaces between stars. We have traveled far to reach your small, bright planet." Jiho stepped forward to the fence, keeping his hands visible and empty. He had dealt with many tense situations in his military career, but nothing quite like this. "Welcome to Earth," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We are willing to talk." The Vex leader tilted its head as if considering this. "Your species interests us, human. We have studied your world for many cycles. We have watched your cities that burn with artificial light. We have seen your homes that glow through the dark hours. We have observed your young ones who cry without illumination." The alien stepped closer, and its large eyes seemed to reflect the base lights. "You are a species that fears the darkness. This makes you weak. We Vex own the dark places of the galaxy. We move through shadows. We hunt in the spaces where light cannot reach. We have conquered 12 worlds already, all of them filled with creatures like you, creatures that run from the night." Lieutenant Day was recording everything on his tablet. His hands shook slightly as he filmed the aliens, but his training kept him focused. The conversation was being broadcast to military leaders around the world. "Your bright cities will make excellent targets," the Vex leader continued. "Your people will gather under lights like insects around flames. It will be easy to find you." Easy to hunt you, easy to make you surrender. Commander Mira stepped up beside Jiho. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were alert. I think you may have the wrong idea about us, she said. The Vex leader made a sound that might have been laughter. It was like metal scraping against stone. We have watched your species for many years. Human, we see how you flood your world with light. We see how you fear the dark corners of your own dwellings. We see how you teach your offspring to avoid shadows. You misunderstand us, Myra replied. We do not fear the dark. We simply prefer light for our daily work. The alien leader looked at her with those large dark eyes. Your cities blaze with artificial suns. Even in the deepest night, your homes glow with electric fire. Your children cannot sleep without small lights to comfort them. You are clearly a species of cowards. Jiho felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. Perhaps you should learn more about us before making such assumptions. The Vex leader stepped back and gestured to the ship behind him. We give you 3 days to prepare your surrender. When the moon is dark again, we will return with our full fleet. Have your leaders ready to bow before us, or we will hunt every human through your own shadows. What if we refuse? Myra asked. Then you will learn why 12 worlds have already fallen to us. The alien replied. We are creatures of the dark. We see in the deepest shadows. We move without sound. We strike without warning. Your species that fears the night will be easy. Pray. The 3 Vex turned and walked back toward their ship. The opening in the hull reappeared as they approached, and they disappeared inside. Within moments, the vessel began to rise from the desert floor. It climbed silently into the night sky until it was just another dark patch among the stars. Jiho looked at his team. The base was completely quiet. Everyone had heard the conversation. Everyone understood what was coming. Well, Jiho said finally, that was interesting. They really think we are afraid of the dark, Myra said, shaking her head. Should we tell them about our night vision technology? Not yet, Jiho replied. Let them think what they want to think. Meanwhile, get me Colonel Tay on the emergency line and wake up Dr. Yoon in the research division. Day was already typing on his tablet. Sir, should I also contact the Special Forces night operations teams? All of them. Jiho confirmed. Every single unit trained for darkness combat. If these aliens want to play games in the dark, then we should show them what humans do when the lights go out. The base came alive with quiet activity. Soldiers moved to their positions. Communications officers sent coded messages to bases around the world. Research teams began preparing equipment that had been designed for exactly this kind of situation. Vex had made one critical error. In their assessment of humanity, they had assumed that because humans use light, they feared darkness, but humans had been mastering the dark for thousands of years. They had learned to hunt in caves, to fight in forests, to move through shadows like ghosts. The aliens thought they were the hunters, but they were about to discover what happened when the prey decided to hunt back. Dr. Yoon arrived at the military base before dawn. Her convoy of research trucks followed her through the main gate. The scientist had received Captain Jiho's emergency call and immediately gathered her best equipment and her most trusted team members. She had spent 20 years developing technology for night combat, and this was exactly what she had been preparing for. Recording of the alien encounter played on every screen in the research lab. Dr. Yoon watched it 3 times, taking notes. On her tablet, her team gathered around her waiting for instructions. They had worked together for years and knew that their boss was thinking through every detail. Look at their eyes, she said, pointing to the frozen image on the screen. They are huge, much larger than human eyes. This tells us they evolved in low light conditions. Their skin is pale, almost white. This means they have never lived under bright sunlight. Her assistant Dr. Kim nodded and added more observations. And their movements are very smooth. They do not make sudden jerky motions like humans do when we try to move quietly. This suggests they are naturally silent. Dr. Yoon smiled grimly. Exactly. But notice something else. When our floodlights hit them, they squint. They turn their heads away slightly. They are not comfortable with bright light. She pulled up more data on her computer. For the past 10 years, we have been developing night vision technology that works in complete darkness. We have sound dampening equipment that makes human soldiers nearly silent. We have heat masking gear that hides our body temperature from thermal sensors. The research team began unpacking their equipment. Night vision goggles that could see in multiple light spectrums, silent communication devices that worked without radio signals, clothing that absorbed sound and scattered heat signatures. All of it designed for soldiers who needed to operate in complete darkness. Meanwhile, Colonel Tay was gathering his special forces in the main briefing room. These were not ordinary soldiers, they were men and women who had trained in caves deep underground. They had practiced combat in abandoned buildings with no lights. They had learned to move through dense forests on moonless nights. Sergeant Hoon stood at attention as Colonel Tay addressed the group. Hoon was famous throughout the military for his ability to move without making any sound. He could cross a room full of sleeping people without waking anyone. He could track enemies through terrain where others would be completely lost. What did you think of our visitors? Sergeant Colonel Tay asked. Hoon grinned, and his fellow soldiers leaned forward to hear his assessment. So they move like they think they own the night, but to my ears, they are actually quite loud. Their footsteps have a rhythm. Their breathing makes a soft whistling sound, and they smell different, sweet like flowers. Very easy to track. Corporal Nara raised her hand. She was the team's best sniper and had made impossible shots in complete darkness. Sir, their heat signatures are unusual. They seem to run cooler than humans, but that actually makes them easier to spot with thermal imaging equipment. Colonel Tay nodded approvingly. His soldiers were already thinking like hunters rather than prey. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. The aliens think we are afraid of the dark, he said. But we have been fighting in darkness for thousands of years. Our ancestors hunted woolly mammoths in caves lit only by torches. We have fought wars in jungle nights so dark you could not see your own. Handy Aryun entered the briefing room carrying cases of new equipment. She began handing out devices that looked like small coins. These are sound dampeners, she explained. They create a field around you that absorbs noise. You can move across gravel without making a sound. She also distributed updated night vision goggles. These work in infrared, thermal, and light amplification modes simultaneously. You can see heat signatures, movement patterns, and even detect the faint glow from alien skin. The soldiers examined their new equipment with the careful attention of professionals who knew their lives might depend on these tools. Each device was tested, checked, and tested again, until everyone was satisfied. Captain Jiho spent the day in video conferences with world leaders. The conversation was similar in every country. The aliens expected humanity to cower in fear, but humans had been mastering darkness since the Stone Age. The president of Korea appeared on the main screen. Our ancestors fought off invasions in mountain caves during winter nights when the cold could kill you before the enemy could. We know how to use darkness as a weapon. General Kim from the Night Operations Division shared tactical information. We have been tracking their scout ships with our satellite network. They are mapping our major cities, looking for the brightest areas. They think we will all be huddled under streetlights waiting for them to attack. That is perfect, Jiho replied. Let them think exactly that. Keep all city lights burning normally. But start moving our real military assets to places where we have every advantage around the world. Similar preparations were taking place in the Amazon rainforest. Soldiers who knew every trail and every sound were setting up ambush points. In the Arctic, military teams were using the endless polar night to mask their movements. In urban areas, special forces were learning the layout of every tunnel and abandoned building. The aliens had given humanity 3 days to surrender, but humanity was using those 3 days to prepare for the kind of fight the Vex had never experienced before. Aryun worked through the night analyzing every second of the alien footage. She studied their movement patterns, their reaction times, their apparent blind spots. Her team ran computer simulations to predict how the aliens would behave in different combat situations. They are apex predators in their natural environment, she concluded in her report, but they have never faced prey that fights back. They have conquered 12 worlds, but those species were probably genuinely afraid of the Dark Colonel. Tay received reports from special forces units around the globe. Every team was ready. Every piece of equipment was tested. Every strategy was practiced. The soldiers were not afraid. They were excited. This was what they had trained for their entire careers. Lieutenant Day coordinated communications between all the military units. His job was to make sure that when the aliens returned, every human force would be ready to respond instantly. The young officer had not slept in 36 hours, but he remained focused on his duties. The second day brought more alien scout ships. They appeared at random locations around the world, always in areas of darkness. The ships would hover silently for a few minutes, then disappear again. The aliens were clearly studying human settlements, looking for weaknesses, but they were also revealing their own patterns. Dr. Yoon's team tracked every scout ship and began to understand how the aliens operated. They preferred areas with no artificial light. They avoided locations where humans were clearly active. They seemed to assume that darkness meant safety. On the third day, the final preparations were completed. Weapons were distributed to positions around every major city. Soldiers took their places in locations the aliens would never think to look. Underground tunnels provided hidden movement routes. Abandoned buildings became sniper nests. Dense forests became staging areas for ambush teams. The aliens had studied humanity for years, but they had only seen what humans did in the light. They had never observed what humans could do in the darkness. They had never witnessed the deadly efficiency of soldiers who treated night as their natural hunting ground. As the sun set on the third day, Captain Jiho stood in his command center surrounded by screens showing military positions around the world. Every unit was ready, every plan was in place. Every soldier knew their role. The aliens thought they were coming to hunt terrified prey huddled under bright lights. Instead, they were about to encounter predators who had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. Tonight, the Vex would learn what happened when they tried to hunt creatures that had already claimed the darkness as their own territory. Tonight, they would discover that humans were not the prey they had expected. Tonight, the hunt would begin, but the aliens would not be the hunters. The third night arrived with no moon in the sky. The darkness was complete and perfect, exactly as the Vex had planned. Captain Jiho stood in his underground command center watching dozens of screens that showed cities around the world. The streets were bright with normal lighting, but something was different, something the aliens would not notice until it was too late. At exactly midnight, the alien fleet appeared. The sky filled with dark ships that blocked out the stars. Hundreds of vessels descended toward major cities on every continent. Their hulls absorbed light, making them nearly invisible against the black sky. But human radar tracked every single one. Seoul was the first target. The Vex command ships settled over the city center, while smaller vessels spread out to cover the surrounding areas. The aliens expected to find millions of terrified humans cowering under streetlights. Instead, they found empty streets. Where are they? The Vex commander asked his officers as his ship landed in the main plaza. The city blazed with electric light, but the buildings seemed hollow. Lieutenant Zev studied his sensor readings. Sir, the life signs are scattered. They are not clustered in the bright areas as we predicted. They seem to be spread throughout the dark spaces around the city. The Vex commander felt the first hint of confusion. His species had conquered 12 worlds, and the pattern was always the same. The prey gathered under lights, seeking safety and illumination. The hunters moved through darkness, picking off stragglers until the survivors surrendered. This was different. This was wrong. What the Vex did not know was that the humans had spent 3 days moving to prepared positions. Underground tunnel systems connected every major building. Empty subway stations had been converted into command centers. Abandoned warehouses had become staging areas for special forces. Team Sergeant Hoon led his squad through the underground passages beneath Seoul. They moved in complete silence, their new equipment making no sound at all. Above them, alien soldiers searched the empty streets, confused by the lack of cowering civilians. Teams in position, Hoon whispered into his communication device. Similar reports came from around the world. Human forces were ready. The first strike came from Corporal Nara. She had positioned herself in a building that had been dark for 3 days. Her thermal scope easily picked up the heat signature of a Vex patrol moving through the street below. The aliens were cooler than humans, but they still glowed like targets against the cold concrete. Her silenced rifle fired once. The Vex leader dropped instantly. The other aliens looked around in confusion. Their large eyes were perfect for seeing in natural darkness, but they could not detect a muzzle flash from a weapon they had never encountered in Tokyo Private. Sang crawled through the storm drain system beneath the city. He had been moving for 2 hours, placing explosive charges under alien vehicles. The Vex never looked down, never considered that their enemies might attack from below ground. The first explosion lit up the night sky as an alien transport disintegrated. The Vex soldiers rushed toward the blast site but found Nothing. No enemies, no evidence of where the attack had come from, just scattered metal and the smell of burned electronics in. New York Captain Wu had prepared a different kind of trap. His team controlled the electrical grid for 6 city blocks. They waited until alien patrols were in position, then systematically shut off power in calculated patterns. The darkness moved like a living thing. Streetlights went out in sequence, creating waves of shadow that flowed around alien positions. The Vex found themselves constantly turning on portable lights, making themselves perfect targets for human snipers positioned in buildings they thought were empty. "This is impossible," the Vex commander reported to his fleet. "They are not afraid. They are attacking us." The aliens tried to adapt. They brought out brighter lights and more sophisticated sensors. But humans had been preparing for this exact scenario. Every countermeasure had been anticipated. Every alien advantage had been neutralized. Dr. Yoon's equipment proved its worth perfectly. The sound dampeners made human soldiers nearly silent. The multi-spectrum night vision gave them clear sight in any lighting condition. The heat-masking clothing made them invisible to alien thermal detection in London. Major Jin led his forces through the city's extensive underground network. They emerged from subway tunnels, from basement passages, from utility corridors. The aliens had mapped the surface, but they had no idea about the hidden world beneath their feet. The attack on the Vex command post was swift and devastating. Human soldiers appeared from manholes, from building foundations, from spaces between structures that the aliens had not thought to guard. The assault was coordinated perfectly, with each team knowing exactly when and where to strike. The aliens fought back with advanced energy weapons and superior technology. But they were fighting on human terms now, in an environment where humans had every possible advantage. Colonel Tay watched the battle reports with satisfaction. His soldiers were performing exactly as trained. They moved through darkness like ghosts. They struck without warning. They disappeared before the aliens could respond. Sir Sergeant Hoon reported through his communication device. "They are starting to group together, staying in the light, moving in large formations." Good Tay replied. "That makes them easier targets for our heavy weapons teams." The pattern was repeating around the world. The Vex were learning to fear the darkness, but their lessons were coming too late. Human forces controlled the night. They owned the shadows. They had turned the aliens' greatest weapon into their own advantage. In Berlin, a Vex patrol found themselves surrounded by enemies they could not see. Human soldiers had positioned themselves in every dark corner of the city block. The aliens turned on their lights, but the humans simply moved to different shadows. The Vex commander tried orbital bombardment, but the human response was ready for that. 2 underground bunkers protected essential personnel. Mobile command centers kept the operation running even under heavy fire. "They are systematically destroying our ground forces," the alien tactical officer reported. "We have lost contact with 30% of our units." "How is this possible?" the commander demanded. "They are supposed to be afraid of the dark, sir. Our intelligence was clearly wrong. The humans do not fear darkness. They have weaponized it." Reports continued to flow in from every battlefield. Human forces were winning engagements they should have lost. They were appearing in places the aliens thought were secure. They were fighting with a coordination and efficiency that seemed impossible. The Vex had spent years studying human cities, but they had only watched during daylight hours. They had seen the artificial lighting, but they had never observed what humans did when those lights went out. They had never witnessed the deadly skills of soldiers who treated darkness as their natural hunting ground. As dawn approached, the alien fleet began to suffer serious losses. Ships were being destroyed by weapons fired from positions the Vex could not locate. Ground forces were scattered and demoralized. The species that had terrorized 12 worlds was learning what it felt like to be hunted. The humans had turned the night into their weapon. They had made darkness their ally. They had shown the galaxy that some prey was more dangerous than any predator. The hunt had begun, but the Vex were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted. The Vex had conquered 12 worlds in the past 50 years, but none of those victories had prepared them for what they found on Earth. The pattern had always been the same: land in darkness. Hunt the prey that cowered in the light, collect the survivors who begged for mercy. Earth was different. The humans were not cowering, they were hunting back. Dr. Yoon monitored the global battle from her command center deep beneath the Korean military base. Every screen showed the same story: human forces were winning engagements that should have been impossible. The aliens were superior in technology numbers and physical capability, but they were fighting in an environment where none of that mattered. The Vex are night adapted, but they are not night hunters. She explained to the assembled generals they evolved to see in darkness, but they have always been the apex predator. They have never learned to fight something that hunts them back. Lieutenant Day coordinated the worldwide response from his position. Next to Dr. Yoon, reports flowed in from every continent and every battle zone. The story was consistent everywhere. Human forces were using darkness as their primary weapon in the Amazon rainforest. Soldiers moved through the jungle like ancient spirits. They knew every trail, every sound, every hiding place. The Vex tried to follow, but the humans disappeared into shadows that seemed to swallow them completely. The aliens brought in thermal imaging equipment, but the humans had prepared for that too. Dr. Yoon's heat masking technology made soldiers nearly invisible to infrared detection. The Vex found themselves firing at empty jungle while human snipers picked them off from positions they could not locate in. The Arctic, the endless polar night, gave human forces an advantage. The aliens had never encountered the Vex, were used to darkness, but they had never experienced the kind of complete blackness that existed at the top of the world. Captain Minjin led his Arctic warfare team across the frozen landscape. They moved on skis using paths they had memorized during years of training. The aliens floundered in the snow, their large eyes useless in the swirling white darkness of a polar storm. The Vex tried to use their advanced sensors, but human electronic warfare teams jammed their signals. Dr. Yoon's research division had spent years studying alien technology, and they knew exactly how to disrupt the enemy equipment in urban areas around the world. The battle took on a different character. The aliens expected to find humans hiding in bright buildings. Instead, they found cities that had been turned into vast hunting grounds. The humans controlled the infrastructure. They could shut off power to any building, create darkness anywhere they wanted. The Vex would secure an area only to find themselves plunged into complete blackness as human teams cut the electrical supply. Major Yejin commanded the urban warfare division in Seoul. Her soldiers moved through the city like shadows, using every tunnel, every rooftop, every hidden passage. The aliens mapped the surface, but they had no understanding of the three-dimensional battlefield. The humans had created. The Vex tried to counter human tactics by bringing in more lighting equipment. They set up powerful floodlights that turned night into day, but the humans simply moved their operations to different areas. The city was too large and the human forces too mobile. We are fighting ghosts, the Vex tactical officer reported to his commander. They appear, strike, and vanish before we can respond. The aliens attempted to use their superior firepower to level entire city blocks, but human forces had prepared for that possibility. Underground bunkers protected essential personnel, while mobile command units kept the resistance organized. Colonel Tae received reports from his special forces teams around the world. Every unit was performing beyond expectations. The soldiers were not just fighting, they were dominating engagements against technologically superior enemies. The key was preparation. Tae realized as he studied the battle reports the humans had spent 3 days getting ready, while the aliens had spent 3 days being overconfident. Sergeant Hoon led his team through the subway tunnels beneath Seoul. They had been moving for 6 hours, striking at alien patrols and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. His squad had eliminated 20 enemy soldiers without taking a single casualty, Sir Hoon reported. Through his silent communication system, the aliens are starting to bunch up. They are afraid to spread out in small groups anymore. Perfect. Colonel Tae replied, that makes them easier targets for our heavy weapons teams. The psychological effect was as important as the tactical advantage. The Vex had built their empire on fear. They terrorized other species into submission. But they had never experienced fear themselves. Now they were learning what it felt like to be hunted by something more dangerous than they were. Dr. Yoon analyzed the alien behavior patterns from her command center. The Vex are adapting, she observed, but they are adapting in predictable ways. They are doing exactly what we expected them to do. The aliens were clustering together, staying in brightly lit areas, moving in large formations. All of these responses made them easier targets for human forces who had trained for exactly this scenario in Paris. Lieutenant Soman coordinated an attack on a Vex command center. The aliens had fortified the building and surrounded it with lights, thinking this would keep them safe. Instead, it made them perfect targets for human artillery teams positioned kilometers away. The building exploded in a fireball that lit up the night sky. The Vex survivors stumbled out into the darkness where human special forces were waiting. The aliens who had conquered 12 worlds found themselves prisoners of creatures they had planned to exterminate. The battle was not one-sided. The Vex had superior technology and their weapons were devastating when they could find targets to shoot at, but increasingly they found themselves firing at shadows while the real threats remained invisible. In Mumbai, Captain Dongjin led his forces through the crowded urban environment. The aliens tried to use the civilian population as cover, but the humans had evacuated the city center days earlier. The Vex found themselves alone in a maze of buildings where human soldiers knew every hiding place. The aliens brought in aircraft to provide aerial support, but human surface-to-air missile teams had positioned themselves on rooftops throughout the city. The Vex pilots found themselves under attack from directions they had not expected around the world. The pattern continued. Human forces struck from darkness, disappeared into shadows, and reappeared in new locations. The aliens who had mastered night hunting were being out-hunted by creatures who had turned darkness into an art form. The Vex commander stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. Half his ground forces were gone. His ships were taking damage from weapons he could not locate. His soldiers were reporting ghost attacks and phantom enemies. This should not be possible. He said to his tactical officer, "These creatures are supposed to fear the dark, sir." The officer replied, "Our intelligence was wrong. The humans do not fear darkness. They have made it their weapon." The Vex had spent decades studying human behavior, but they had only observed what humans did in the light. They had never seen what happened when the lights went out. They had never witnessed the transformation of prey into predator. As the night continued, the alien losses mounted. The species that had terrorized the galaxy was learning that some creatures were more dangerous in the dark than they were. The humans had claimed the night and turned it into their greatest advantage. The masters of shadow were no longer the Vex, they were the humans, who had learned to hunt in darkness. The Vex fleet commander stood in his command center staring at reports that made no sense. In 8 hours of combat, he had lost 60% of his ground forces and 30% of his ships. The species that had conquered 12 worlds without serious resistance was being systematically destroyed by creatures they had assumed would surrender immediately. "This cannot be accurate," he told his tactical officer. "Check the reports again, sir." The officer replied nervously, "All reports have been verified. Our forces are being eliminated by enemies they cannot see, cannot track, and cannot predict." The commander activated his communication system and spoke to his surviving ground forces. "All units retreat to designated safe zones. Maximum illumination protocol. Bring all portable lighting equipment." But the human forces had prepared for this response as well. Captain Jiho watched the alien retreat from his underground command center. The Vex were clustering together under their bright lights exactly as Dr. Yoon's psychological analysis had predicted. Phase 2, he ordered into his communication device. "Time to show them what happens when humans really start hunting." Dr. Yoon's research had produced much more than night vision equipment and sound dampeners. She had studied every aspect of human warfare from ancient cave paintings to modern special operations. Her team had developed weapons and tactics specifically designed for fighting in complete darkness. The second phase began with coordinated attacks on the Vex fleet itself. The aliens had never considered that their enemies might attack from above or below. Their ships were designed to dominate ground-based opponents, not to defend against three-dimensional assault. Private Kang led his team up the side of a Vex cruiser using climbing equipment and magnetic grips. The aliens had never encountered enemies who could scale vertical surfaces. The ship's hull offered no resistance to human climbing gear. Inside the vessel, Kang's team moved through corridors like ghosts. Their equipment masked their heat signatures, muffled their footsteps, and scattered their electromagnetic emissions. The ship's sensors detected nothing, while human soldiers planted explosive charges throughout the critical systems. The Vex crew never knew they were under attack until the explosions began. The ship listed to one side as its power systems failed. Secondary explosions tore through the hull as the vessel crashed into the city below. Similar attacks were happening around the world. Human forces had developed tactics for boarding alien vessels that the Vex had never imagined. Their ships were invulnerable to conventional attack, but they had no defense against enemies who could infiltrate them. Invisibly, they are inside our ships, the Vex commander's lieutenant reported in panic. How did they bypass our sensors? Because they understand darkness better than we do, the commander replied grimly. All units fall back to full illumination positions. The Vex forces retreated to areas flooded with artificial light. They brought out every lamp, every floodlight, every source of illumination they could find. The aliens believed that bright light would save them from the human hunters, but the humans had prepared for this response too. As the alien forces clustered under their lights, they became perfect targets for long-range weapons. Human snipers positioned kilometers away could see the brightly lit alien positions clearly. Corporal Nera lay on a rooftop 5 kilometers from the main Vex concentration in Seoul. Through her advanced scope, she could see individual aliens moving around their command post. The bright lights they had set up made them visible from an impossible distance. Her rifle fired once and the alien commander dropped. The other Vex looked around in confusion, unable to determine where the shot had come from. A target that was clearly visible to them was completely invisible to their enemies. The psychological effect was devastating. The aliens who had terrorized the galaxy were learning what it felt like to be helpless. The hunters had become the hunted. Major Yejin coordinated urban warfare operations from her mobile command center. Her forces moved through Seoul like a coordinated pack of predators. Each team knew exactly where the others were positioned. Each attack was timed to maximum effect. The aliens tried to use their superior firepower to destroy entire city blocks, but human forces had prepared underground bunkers and mobile command centers. Even under heavy bombardment, the human resistance continued. In London, Captain Wu led his team through the subway system toward a major Vex position. The aliens had fortified an entire city block, but they had not considered attack from below ground. The humans emerged from manholes and basement tunnels surrounding the enemy position. The battle was swift and decisive. The aliens found themselves under attack from every direction by enemies they could not see. The Vex, who had conquered 12 worlds, were overwhelmed by tactics they had never encountered. Sir Sergeant Hoon reported to Colonel Tay, they are getting desperate, starting to fire randomly into the darkness. Let them waste their ammunition. Tay replied, we know where they are. They have no idea where we are. The aliens attempted orbital bombardment, but human forces had prepared for that as well. Underground facilities protected essential personnel while mobile units kept the resistance organized. The Vex found themselves bombarding empty buildings while the real threats remained hidden. Dr. Yoon analyzed the battle data from her command center. The aliens are making every mistake we predicted, she reported to Captain Jiho. They are clustering together, making themselves easier targets. They are using lights that reveal their positions. They are panicking instead of adapting. The human advantage was not just technological or tactical, it was psychological. The Vex had built their empire on being the apex predators of the galaxy. They had never learned to fight from a position of disadvantage. In contrast, human military doctrine was based on fighting superior enemies. Humans had spent thousands of years developing tactics for defeating larger, stronger, better equipped opponents. The aliens were discovering that technology alone was not enough. The Vex tried to retreat to their ships, but human forces had prepared for that as well. Surface-to-air missiles destroyed vessels attempting to leave the atmosphere. Electronic warfare teams jammed communication between ships and ground forces. Private Sang coordinated demolition operations in Tokyo. His team had spent hours placing explosive charges under alien landing sites. When the Vex tried to evacuate, the ground beneath their ships exploded. The vessels crashed or were damaged beyond repair. Around the world, the pattern continued. Human forces struck from darkness, disappeared into shadows, and reappeared in unexpected locations. The aliens who had mastered night hunting were being systematically outmaneuvered by creatures who had turned darkness into science. The Vex commander received his final tactical report. 70% of ground forces eliminated, 50% of fleet destroyed or damaged, remaining forces surrounded and under constant attack. Order general retreat. He commanded all ships capable of movement leave immediately, but even the retreat was not safe. Human forces had prepared for this possibility as well. The aliens found themselves under attack during their withdrawal. Long-range weapons struck at ships trying to escape. The Species that had terrorized the galaxy for decades was learning what it felt like to be the prey the humans had claimed the darkness and turned it into their greatest weapon. The night belonged to humanity now. The Vex were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. The first light of dawn broke over the Korean military base, and Captain Jiho stood on the roof of his command center watching the last alien ships disappear into the morning sky. The Vex fleet that had arrived with hundreds of vessels was leaving. With less than half their original numbers, their ships were damaged, their forces were scattered, and their confidence was completely destroyed around the world. The story was the same. The species that had conquered 12 worlds had been defeated by creatures they thought were afraid of the dark. The humans had turned the night into their greatest weapon and used it to achieve an impossible victory. Think they will be back? Commander Myra asked as she joined Jiho on the roof. Maybe, Jiho replied. But if they do return, they will think twice about hunting in the dark. The cleanup began immediately. Debris from alien ships was collected and transported to research facilities. The few Vex prisoners were treated according to international law. Though they seemed confused by the concept of mercy from creatures they had planned to exterminate, Dr. Yoon was already analyzing the battle data from her laboratory. The aliens were fascinating from a scientific perspective. They had evolved to be perfect predators in low-light environments, but they had never learned to fight something that could fight back. Their entire military strategy was based on psychological warfare. She explained to the assembled researchers they used fear as their primary weapon, but humans have been dealing with fear for thousands of years. We learned to master it. The Vex prisoners were interviewed by military intelligence officers. The aliens seemed genuinely shocked by their defeat. They had expected to find cowering prey. Instead, they had encountered predators more dangerous than themselves. Your species is impossible, one alien told his interviewer. We studied you for years. We saw your cities blazing with lights. We observed your fear of darkness. How did you become hunters? The human officer smiled. We were never afraid of the dark. We just prefer light for our daily work. But when you threatened us, you forced us to show you what we can do. When the lights go out, Colonel Tae gathered his special forces for debriefing. His soldiers looked tired, but satisfied. They had accomplished something that military historians would study for generations: the defeat of a technologically superior enemy through superior tactics and preparation. The key was understanding our enemy, Tae explained to his assembled troops. The Vex assumed we were like the other species they had conquered. They thought fear of darkness was universal. But humans are different. We conquered darkness thousands of years ago. Sergeant Hoon nodded in agreement. Sir, they moved like they owned the night. But we showed them that darkness belongs to us. We made it our weapon. The victory was celebrated around the world, but the military remained alert. The night operations teams continued their training. Research divisions worked to improve their technology. Command structures stayed ready for the next threat. Reports from around the globe confirmed the scope of the human victory. In every major battle, human forces had outmaneuvered and defeated alien troops that should have been superior. The key had been preparation, understanding the enemy, and using humanity's greatest strength. We learned something important about ourselves, Captain Jiho said in his report to world leaders. The galaxy is full of species that fear the dark, but we are not one of them. We are the ones who learned to hunt there. The story of the battle spread quickly through human communication networks. Social media carried videos of alien ships retreating. News organizations interviewed soldiers who had fought impossible odds and won. Children played games pretending to be the special forces who had saved the world. But the victory had deeper implications. The aliens had broadcast their defeat across the galaxy. Other species who had heard stories of the terrifying Vex now knew that these monsters could be beaten. The humans had shown the galaxy that even the most feared predators could become prey. Lieutenant Day compiled the final casualty reports. Human losses were surprisingly light considering the scope of the battle. The aliens had superior technology, but they had been fighting on humanity terms in an environment where humans had every advantage. Dr. Yoon's equipment had performed perfectly. The sound dampeners had made human soldiers nearly silent. The night vision technology had given them clear sight in any conditions. The heat-masking clothing had made them invisible to alien sensors. The research division is already working on improvements, Dr. Yoon reported. If we face another night-adapted species, we will be even better prepared. The alien technology was studied and reverse-engineered. Human scientists learned new techniques for stealth propulsion and energy weapons, but the most important lesson was not technological, it was strategic. The Vex had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that using artificial light meant fearing natural darkness, but humans had been lighting their cities for thousands of years, not out of fear, but out of choice. When the lights went out, humans became something different. They became the creatures their ancestors had been when they hunted mammoths in Ice Age caves. They became the warriors who had fought battles in medieval forests. They became the soldiers who had mastered urban warfare in modern cities. The galaxy began to receive new information about humanity. The species that had seemed weak and light-dependent was actually one of the most dangerous night hunters in known space. The creatures that appeared to fear darkness had actually weaponized it. Other alien species started to reconsider their assumptions about Earth. The humans were not the easy prey they had appeared to be. They were predators who had learned to hide their true nature behind electric lights and modern cities. Captain Jiho stood in his command center 1 week after the battle, watching reports from around the world. Life was returning to normal, but humanity had changed. The victory over the Vex had revealed something important about human nature. We are not just another species, he said to his assembled officers. We are something unique. We took the thing that other creatures fear most and made it our greatest strength. The night sky above the base looked peaceful. Now the stars twinkled as they always had, but humanity relationship with darkness had changed forever. The species that had conquered fire and electricity had also conquered the night itself. In the depths of space, alien civilizations were learning a new lesson about Earth. The humans were not afraid of the dark. They were the ones who hunted there, and any species that tried to use darkness as a weapon against humanity would discover that they had challenged creatures who had already claimed the night as their own territory. The Vex had thought they were the masters of darkness. They had learned they were wrong. The real masters were the humans who had turned shadow into science, fear into strength, and night into their greatest weapon. The dark belonged to humanity now, and the galaxy would never forget it.